What's up everyone? Alex here. Fantasian is finally out, and perhaps coincidentally, it's released on the same day Final Fantasy VI came out in Japan 27 years ago. The significance of the day is not lost on Hironobu Sakaguchi, who tweeted said happenstance, maybe due to the fact that his work on Fantasian reflects so much of that part of his life. In fact, Fantasian feels like it could have been released between Final Fantasy VII and VIII as a long-lost Final Fantasy. In this video, I'll be taking you on a journey through this old new world, one that's an exciting blend of classic Final Fantasy storytelling and design, with some modern conveniences that are sure to titillate and captivate JRPG fans. This review is made possible by viewers like you, so please leave a like, comment, then subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed this video. Before we continue, I want to get one thing out of the way. My main focus on this video is to talk about the game and only about the game. As such, I want to present Fantasian as though it is a game separated from its current available platform. I believe that a game can be good regardless of where it comes out, provided that its developers take good care to make the experience great across the board. And I can confirm that that is indeed the case, after playing it for hours on both my iPhone and Mac on the same save file. More importantly, if the game does come out on other platforms in the future, I want this video to stand out on its own, independent of the initial platforms the game was exclusive to. At its core, Fantasian is a turn-based JRPG that features fixed camera angles, random battles, and a world map. A world map, you say? It almost feels like ages since I played a proper JRPG with a world map. More importantly, it is the last game that Hironobu Sakaguchi will be producing, alongside Nobuo Uematsu, who has also stated that this too might be the last full soundtrack he'll ever compose. Sakaguchi and Uematsu's collaborations span as far back as their time at Squaresoft in the mid-80s, which led to the creation of the Final Fantasy series. So if you consider Fantasian as their final collective swan song, then you're now beginning to understand why this game evokes a higher emotional value for me as both a gamer and a fan of their work. Fantasian is divided into two parts, with the second part releasing later in 2021. This review only covers Part 1. Fantasian puts you in the role of Leo, who awakens in a strange world that's being encroached upon by a mechanical plague that's slowly consuming everything it touches. As you venture forth on your journey, recovering Leo's lost memories along the way, you'll unearth the mysterious truths behind this dark miasma, leading to a discovery that will shape your understanding of the world around you. Throughout your journey, you'll be battling monsters and creatures of various shapes and sizes in classic turn-based combat. Fantasian's take on turn-based gameplay comes with a unique convenience. You have two commands readily accessible to you, which consists of your normal attack and a secondary action. This secondary action is based off of the last skill or item you've used in your last turn, so this acts as a quick way to invoke the same action immediately. That being said, you can easily choose a different action by going to skills or items and selecting something different, which will then become the default secondary action in subsequent turns. One thing that I absolutely love about Fantasian's battle system is the way that certain skills can hit multiple enemies. For example, Leo's Slash can hit all enemies within a straight line, while Kina's Holy Magic can also be curved to hit enemies in an arc. And as with most modern games in the genre, you can conveniently see the turn order of every party member and enemy on screen, as well as have a choice to scan an enemy's weakness, as well as learn about their susceptibility to status ailments and what items you'll get, whether it's stolen or dropped after battle. Progression is your typical experience point leveling system, with characters learning new skills when reaching certain levels. Taken by itself, Fantasian's combat system will definitely sound all too familiar. However, it has one particular mechanic that makes its combat feel even more fun and engaging. That has everything to do with the game's dimension system. Picture this. Have you ever wished that in a JRPG with random battles, you could just delay fighting any and all encountered enemies later when you wanted or needed to? That's what the dimension system allows. By turning on Dimension, any enemies you encounter while exploring won't interrupt your exploration. Instead, these enemies will be sent to the Dimension, where you can face these enemies at any time. There are only 3 caveats to this. First, If you encounter a group of enemies with at least one brand new enemy you've never fought before, you won't be able to bank them and you're forced into a fight. Secondly, you may only bank a total of 30 enemies at a time, so if the dimension meets or exceeds its capacity, you'll have no choice but to face all of them. And finally, certain enemies encountered during a story sequence or dungeon can't be banked at all, which includes bosses naturally. You might ask why anyone would want to do this apart from convenience. That's because all those skills that hit multiple enemies I mentioned earlier starts to become incredibly important. When forced to face a massive group of enemies at the same time, it's easier to dispatch whole groups when they're easily clumped together on the battlefield. Fighting in the dimension also allows for random power-ups to appear on the battlefield that you can also activate by hitting them with your attacks and skills. These power-ups range from increasing the amount of damage you deal to stealing another turn in battle. The convenience of being able to face all your enemies in one go, alongside the inclusion of power-ups that appear while fighting in Dimension, also allows you to save MP as much as you can, which has made banking enemies a must for me when I want to spend the time exploring areas more than fighting enemies. There's something incredibly fun about facing enemies on your own time that makes playing Fantasian a much more pleasant experience than the typical JRPG. Here's a reality check. It's been 10 years since Sakaguchi and Mistwalker released a full-fledged JRPG, with that game being the last story released in Japan on the Wii in 2011. I find it poetic then that Fantasian allowed him to rediscover and recognize the value of his roots. One would think that dabbling in the mobile space might have dulled Sakaguchi's development sensibilities, and yet Fantasian doesn't feel any less ambitious as any of the work he's previously known for. Much of why Fantasian exists is owed to one special game from his past. During an interview, Sakaguchi revealed that he and his colleagues replayed Final Fantasy VI in 2018. Thanks to this experience, he was inspired to work on something that brought back the feeling of playing classic JRPGs, stating that old styles can be great in their own right. That being said, Sakaguchi no longer commanded an army of artists that could create elaborate and rich environments that were the hallmark of Final Fantasy's golden era on the PlayStation. A miniatures hobbyist, Sakaguchi came up with the idea of creating handcrafted dioramas that served as the game's backgrounds very early in the game's development. In order to digitize these physical sets, his studio used drones equipped with 3D scanning technology to digitally recreate them into their development environment. While this process meant that it'd take more time to finish portions of the game, given that they couldn't just change things in a 3D modeling program, the end result is an environment that feels just as rich as any background created with computer graphics, offering, as Sakaguchi puts it, a unique handmade touch that cannot be replaced. Over 150 dioramas were created during production, and the way Fantasian renders each of these environments in-game are just gorgeous, with seamless transitions from one camera angle to the next. The game's story, also penned by Sakaguchi, includes plenty of the narrative elements that old-school Final Fantasy fans may be familiar with, complete with nods of previous games he's worked on, which includes story rivals that have their own unique entrance animations and theme music. As I played through the game and experienced more of the story, I noticed numerous parallels between Leo's want to remember his past to that of Sakaguchi's desire to invoke the spirit of RPGs from a bygone era. And I couldn't help but think at times that Leo's curiosity reflects his creator's dreams of evoking a sense of wonder in anyone who plays Fantasian. Yet this story isn't about the condemnation of the new. It's about how, while our past provides us with clarity about the present, that we're wholly responsible for carving a path into a brighter future independent of the past, and it's a wonderful sentiment buried deep within an otherwise engrossing and entertaining adventure. While Fantasian doesn't feature voice acting, the story is revealed through a series of in-game cutscenes and visual novel-inspired animated sequences called Memories. Memories feature moving text with differing degrees of presentation, delivering a certain amount of variance needed to grab your attention. Each flowing text is accompanied by hand-drawn background art that captures the mood and feel of the story unfolding, providing you with just enough context to let your imagination fill in the blanks. Yet, perhaps the most effective part of these memories is its use of music, which is the most daring soundtrack Uematsu has ever composed. In fact, Fantasian's soundtrack is a reaction to Uematsu's starting realization that he had helped define what a JRPG soundtrack was supposed to sound like. Desiring to break that mold, Uematsu's work on Fantasian features more improvisation than his previous work, perhaps showing more of the famed composer's personality than ever before. Sakaguchi was quoted in saying, "It almost felt like I could hear Uematsu's soul singing," adding that listening to the soundtrack made him tear up 3 or 4 times. Having played the game and listened to it myself, I can honestly say that the combination of Uematsu's songs alongside Sakaguchi's writing elevates Fantasian to a different level for me. Perhaps it's fitting then that the song that's accompanying this portion of my review is named Friendship, as it seemingly paints a portrait of Sakaguchi and Uematsu's time together as collaborators spanning 3 decades of games, with Fantasian putting the final cap in an otherwise incredible career. Perhaps it's unfair for some to hear that my review of Fantasian is inexorably tied to the history of its creators, but I've always believed that a game's quality is also represented by the passion of the people involved. And whether you take these facts into account or not, it doesn't change the fact that Fantasian is as much a story about fighting for our future as it is a story about a desire and longing for simpler times, of a past that once was. There's a delicate balance to be had when towing the line between nostalgia and innovation, and Fantasian manages to deliver an experience that is just as compelling as any modern JRPG. Its soul might feel old, but it feels very genuine, and anyone choosing to join Leo on this journey will find a captivating and rousing adventure through worlds beyond our own.